We're going to be in Numbers chapter 14, if you will follow along in your Bible. Numbers chapter 14. For those of you that weren't here, and just as a refresher for those of you that were, last week we talked about how they were actually, the children of Israel were at the promised land. They were standing there. All they had to do was go in and take it, because God said, I have given it to you. And the spies went in, came back. 2 of them said, we got this. No problem. And the other 10 said, we're scared. We're small. We're like grasshoppers in their sight. And they're giants. And there's just no way. So that's kind of where we left off last week. That was not a good place to have to leave off. But this week I may not get past these first 4 verses, because this is kind of where the meat of this lesson today is. And this is where the Lord has really been dealing with me over the past few months. Over this exact same thing over and over again. So, I'm going to share it with you. Let's read verses 1 through 4, and then I'll go back and make commentary. Numbers chapter 14, verses 1 through 4. And all the congregation, when they heard basically what the 10 spies said, all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. And the whole congregation said unto them, Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? And wherefore hath the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Were it not better for us to return into Egypt? And they said one to another, Let us make a captain, and let us return into Egypt. We have heard this song and dance how many times now? Oh, that we were back in Egypt. Oh, that we hadn't left Egypt. Maybe we should go back to Egypt. And the whole murmuring against Aaron and Moses, well, that's all they've done this whole time, is murmur against somebody, you know? So what I want to talk about in these first 4 verses is kind of going back to what we talked about last week, the grasshopper faith. When we don't have faith like we're supposed to have, and we don't believe that God can do what God said he did, these are the results. And we're going to talk about 4 different results, and there's more than this, but I just want to talk about these 4 from these 4 verses. When we don't believe God, when we don't trust God, these are the results. First off, we see in verse 2, they murmured. And we've already spent a lot of time talking about this one, so I'm not going to take a lot of time today, but when we don't have faith, we complain. We complain about everything. This isn't right. That isn't right. I don't have what I want. I don't have what I need. This, so-and-so treated me bad. It's like all of a sudden everything is just horrible. Well, is everything horrible, or is that just the way we see it? Because we're not trusting God. Because here I see where 12 people went in and saw the exact same sight. They saw the land, they saw the giants, they saw everything. Why is it that 10 of them have this sob story of, we can't do it, and it's just awful, and 2 of them are going, let's go do it, let's take it, What's the difference? Faith. Those 2, Joshua and Caleb, had faith in God, and they said, you know what, if God said we can have it, we can have it. If God said we can do it, we can do it. So let's go do it. Let's not waste any more time. We've been in the wilderness long enough. Let's get out of here. But because of fear instead of faith, the others were whining, and it's that whining soon turned to complaining. It says at first they were crying. They lifted up their voice and cried. There's nothing wrong with crying. When we're disappointed, tears are appropriate, And the Bible talks about how God collects our tears. Some of us have little bottles. Some of us have huge barrels because God collects our tears. So they're precious to God. But if we're crying because of our own lack of faith, I don't know that those tears are quite as precious. God still feels for us. I believe that. But I think he feels for us in the sense of, please just trust me. Please just trust me. Because he knows pretty soon it's going to have all these other consequences like complaining. We finish our crying, and we were sad, now we're mad. And we're going to complain. So they murmured against Moses and Aaron. Well, that leads me to the second one, blaming. Oh yeah, blaming. It's always somebody else's fault. We live in a world where it is always somebody else's fault. I mean, you get these kids, they go into school and they shoot 14 other kids, and then they take them to trial and they say, well, it's because his mama spanked him as a child. That's the only reason he did this. I'm thinking mama didn't spank him enough is what I'm thinking. It's always this, a child misbehaves and it's, well, the reason for that is, the reason for it is the child has misbehaved and they need to be disciplined. Simple. It's not rocket science, but it's getting worse and worse in this land. Well, it's always somebody else's fault. If it's a situation in a family, if it's a situation in a church, well, the preacher said that, well, the member said that, It's always somebody else's fault. So here they are. They're murmuring against Moses and you did this. You brought us. Well, you better be glad they did. Otherwise, you'd still be slaves in Egypt. Where's their gratitude for that? Where's their gratitude in remembering what Moses and Aaron had? How many times Moses had stepped in and told God to spare their lives when God was ready to go, I've had it with these people. How many times had Moses done that? Where's their thanks and gratitude towards Moses? No, they murmured. They murmured against Moses and Aaron, and then in verse 3, you see where they murmured against God too. Wherefore hath the Lord brought us up into this land to kill us? It's God's fault. We got a lot of that going on too. My life's not the way I want, and it's all God's fault. This happened to me, and it's God's fault. God let this happen. Well, God did let it happen, but it might be because He needed it to happen. It's a good thing. We don't understand that, and we can. I can't cover this enough. We can't understand the mind of God. He's God. If we could understand the mind of God, we would be God, right? Well, we're not, and we don't understand God, and we just have to trust. That's what I'm talking about, faith. We just have to trust that if God says, I'm doing this for your good, and isn't that what He says in Romans 8:28? All things work together for good to those who love God. Well, do you love God? Sure. Then if He's doing something, even if it seems bad or negative, God is working it for our good. And we have to trust that, because if we look at the giants like they did, and we say, well, God said this is going to work out for our good, but they're big and they're bad, and I don't see it. I'm reminded of, we saw a show this weekend. It's, what's the name of the show? Battle of the Network Stars. And it's basically an obstacle course competition between TV stars from now and TV stars from way back when. I mean, so you got old, you got young, you got in shape, you got really not in shape, and they team them off into categories. And then this particular one, they had TV cops. So you had all the cop shows, all the way back to like T.J. Hooker, and some of the current cop shows, which I actually knew the old ones better than I do the new ones. But then you had, on the other side, the other team was sci-fi fantasy. And you had Lou Ferrigno, who played the Incredible Hulk, and you had Kevin Sorbo, who played Hercules. TV cops, superheroes. It was hilarious because they do all these little interviews, where they're interviewing, and they kept talking to these TV cops, and they're like, we don't stand a chance. We're against Hercules and the Incredible Hulk, we don't stand a chance. And they just kept saying, they weren't against Hercules and the Incredible Hulk. They were against Kevin Sorbo and Lou Ferrigno, but in their minds, they were against Hercules, the strongest man in the world, and the Incredible Hulk, who you did not make angry, That's who they were against. And it was hilarious because I saw this whole grasshopper faith. Because it's like you could see there's giants in the land. I even leaned over to Jason. I said, there'll be giants in the land. And he goes, yep. Because the TV cops had already given up before they even started. And the final event is a tug of war. And it's held, you've got this team, and then there's a big pool of water in the middle. So if you get pulled, you get pulled into the pool, And they were interviewing the cops and said, how do you feel about, going up against Hercules and the Incredible Hulk? And the guy this guy was in shape. He was a young guy. He was very athletic. He had done a lot of the events and won. I mean, he was just, he looked like he was the first person in the line. And they said, how do you feel? And he said, I'm a good swimmer. He knew he was going in the water. He had already decided he was going in the water because he was going up against Hercules and the Incredible Hulk. And he already had it in his mind, there's no way I can win. And you know what? He ended up in the water. Could it have been different if they had had a different mindset? I think it probably could have. I mean, granted, Lou Ferrigno and Kevin Sorbo are very strong, but they already gave up before they even started. And it's entertaining to watch nonetheless, but I just had this lesson going in my head, and I thought, what a beautiful picture. Thank you, Lord. I can see it right here in living color, They just gave up because they looked at the enemy, or, the other team, and they said, no way, no way. But see, there's the difference. They saw Hercules. They saw the Incredible Hulk. If Joshua and Caleb would have been there, they saw somebody who played Hercules and somebody who played the Incredible Hulk. You see the difference? It's like, okay, this guy, he just plays a superhero. He's not really a superhero. There's a difference. That was Joshua and Caleb's. But the rest of them had this, it's just no hope. So they started complaining, and then they started blaming. Moses, it's your fault. Aaron, it's your fault. God, it's your fault. When you run out of anybody else to blame, just turn it to God. God, it's your fault. How do you think God felt about that? Look at what he'd done for them. He delivered them. He brought them. Look at all the miracles. We've talked about miracle after miracle. He has taken care of them. He has fed them. He has given them water. It talks about during these travels that their feet didn't swell, their shoes didn't wear out. I'm a hiker, y'all. I tell you, you go hiking 2 miles, your feet swell. That's a miracle.
And your boots don't last 40 years.
Yeah, and your boots don't last for. Well, I noticed when I put mine on yesterday, I was like, okay, the back of I rubbed the heel out, the back of the heel, the back of the feet, and I was like, okay, they were starting to get worn. And yesterday I was like, okay, now they're just big holes. So I was like, I gotta replace my boots soon. I've not had them for 40 years. I've had them for a while, but not 40 years. He has done so much for them, and all of that right now is forgotten. Because when we have grasshopper faith, we get that narrow vision, and that's all we can see is what we're mad at, what we're afraid of, and we don't see anything else. All the things that God's done for us, all the ways he's provided for us, we don't see any of that. We don't see anything. So they're blaming, why did God do this? Then, as if that wasn't bad enough, in verse 3, we also see that they quit. They quit. It's actually in verse 2 and 3. Would to God that we had died in Egypt. Would to God that we had died in the wilderness. Let's just go back to Egypt. Really? That's like saying, okay, let's go to Dollywood. And we drive all the way there, and we get to Dollywood, and then we turn around and say, you know what? I really don't want to be here. Let's go home. Really? You drove all that way. Now you're just going to turn around and go back? That's what they did. After all, and I'm thinking, wilderness living is not exactly fun. They're willing to do that again. And then to go back to Egypt, what's going to happen when they go back to Egypt? Do you think they're going to live in luxury and they're going to be slaves again? What gets me about this is what they said in verse 2. It would have been better off if we had died in Egypt, or it would have been better off if we died in the wilderness. Well, if you're thinking you're going to die anyway, why not go try to take the land?
What do you have to lose?
What do you have to lose? If you wanted to die in the wilderness or die in Egypt, why not die trying to take the land? I don't understand their mentality. They're blinded, completely blinded. It's like, well, we would have been better off to die. Now God's brought us here to die. You make no sense. It's like, it would have been better to die in Egypt or better to die in the wilderness than to die here. Why? Why does it make a difference where you die, you know? You could die as a slave. You could die in the wilderness of some disease or something that lasts for a long time and just drags you down. Or you could die a sudden death in battle trying to take the land. I know what I'd choose, and I'm not a warrior, but make it quick. You know, if I'm going to die, make it quick. Don't prolong it. Make it quick. Just, okay, she's done. What do you have to lose? And you might just win. So we have everything to gain and nothing to lose, but they're ready to give up. Why? No faith. No faith. You complain, you blame, you give up. You ever started something and given up? Oh, yeah. Something that even you knew God wanted you to do, and you got doing it, and you got doing it, and it got hard, and you gave up. Been there, done that. Been there to the point where I gave up and then started over again. Got about to the same point where it got tough again, and I gave up again. Started over again, got to the point. That's a lack of faith. It got hard, and I said, I can't do this. The giants are too big. That's why people quit. That's why we quit. We don't have faith in God like we should. And then lastly, I think this is the worst one. Like that's not bad enough. I think the last one's the worst of all. In verse 4, they said one to another, let us make a captain and let us return to Egypt. Do you realize what just happened there? They just replaced God. God was their captain. He was the one who had been leading and ruling them this whole way. And now they get to this point, they're so blinded by their fear and their lack of faith that they said, you know what? Let's make a new captain, and we'll have that captain lead us back to Egypt. That sounds like a real smart idea, doesn't it? Again, I have a question for them. How do you think you're going to get back to Egypt without the Lord? You didn't get here without the Lord. Who are you going to complain to every time you're tired and you're hungry and you're thirsty and who are you going to complain to? You can complain to your captain? Sure. What's he going to do about it? Is he going to rain down manna from heaven? No. Is he going to bring water from a rock? No. See what's happening? They're not even thinking anymore. It's just a reaction. Fear is powerful, y'all. I don't think we give it enough credit. It makes the brain stop working. The brain is an overdrive of the what ifs and the if onlys, Like yesterday we were out for a hike and we saw this big old bear paw print in the mud. Well, we're hiking in bear country. I know there's bears out there. Never seen one, but I know they're there, and we've seen evidence. But, this was a big paw print. All of a sudden, I was terrified. I'm looking around. I'm studying the woods. I'm just looking at everything, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Where's the bear? Where's the bear? Where's the bear? And Jason literally started laughing at me. He goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm looking for the bear. And he said, why? And I said, because I want to make sure it doesn't eat me. And he said, you know we're in bear territory, right? I'm like, yeah, I know. He said, how often do we hike here? Just about every weekend. And how often are you scared of the bears? When I see the big paw print in the ground, that's when. Do you see what happened? We're there all the time. All the time. We are there. I can't tell you how many times we've been there and in places like that. And I know it's the woods. That's their home. I know they're there. I know they're there. But something about seeing the evidence of them being there freaked me out. And I spent the rest of the hike. Yeah. And I kept telling myself, stop being stupid. Because I knew it was stupid. I'm thinking, how many times have you been here and you have never seen a bear? Never. You know why? Because they're as scared of me as I am of them. They don't want to be bothered, and they don't want to bother me. They want to be left alone, so they'll leave me alone. And I'm telling myself that, and yet at the same time I'm going, yeah. My brain was working in two different directions. I'm trying to fill it with the truth and say, you have nothing to worry about. Even if there is a bear, God controls the bear just like he controls everything else. So if he wants the bear to eat you, it will eat you, and if not, you'll be fine, I'm like, God has this, The Bible says our times are in his hands. He's got it. So I'm trying to comfort myself with that, and at the same time, the other side of my brain is going, but what if this, and what if that, and what if this, and what if that, and what if it's a big bear, and what if it's this, and what if we come upon it, and it thinks we're trying to take its babies, and all kinds of stuff. Well, you know where that comes from? Not from God. Because the Bible says that God does not give us the spirit of fear. He gives us the spirit of power and love and a sound mind. I was not practicing a sound mind. Why? Fear. Fear. They were not practicing a sound mind because they were afraid. And so they started making all these decisions. Well, we're just going to give up, and we're going to blame God, and then we're going to take off without God, and we're going to go back. Not thinking this thing through very well because they were afraid. And I actually did get through all 4 verses, and we still have a few minutes, so I'm going to go ahead to verse 5. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. I don't know if they fell on their faces crying or I have no idea. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes. That's a sign of mourning. And they weren't mourning and crying for the same reason the people were mourning and crying. The people were mourning and crying because it was too big and they couldn't do it. Wah, wah, wah. They were renting their clothes and mourning because the people were being so stubborn and having such a lack of faith. They weren't believing them. And so it caused them to mourn. And they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. I like that. It's not just good, not just great. It's exceeding good. It's awesome. It's better than we could have imagined. I mean, for as many months as we've been walking and thinking and talking about it, we got there and it was like, whoa, this is awesome. It's an exceeding good land. It's worth the fight. If the Lord delight in us, verse 8, then he will bring us into this land and give it us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. If the Lord delight in us, well, do you think the Lord delights in them, or would he have not put up with them this far if he didn't? It's obvious the Lord's delighting in them. Only rebel not ye against the Lord. See, that's their real problem. It's not that the people were fighting against Moses and Aaron. They were upset because the people were rebelling against God. They were about to basically leave God. And he says, neither fear ye the people of the land. See? Fear. Don't fear. For they are bread for us. We're going to eat them up. That's what they're saying. We're going to eat them up. They're bread for us. And their defense has departed from them. And the Lord is with us. Fear them not. We have got God on our side. They don't. Who do you think's going to win? I mean, you think the Incredible Hulk and Hercules on your side is good? You got God on your side. They're saying we can't lose. It is a sure thing. God is on our side. Don't be afraid. Let's just go. Let's do it. Sounds convincing. And you can tell their heart's in it. I mean, they're like, they don't stand a chance. But look at in verse 10. But all the congregation bade stone them with stones. Talk about shooting the messenger. Good grief. That's another problem that fear causes. We don't want to hear the truth anymore. Somebody comes and they try to encourage us. Have you ever been that place where somebody's trying to encourage you and you don't want to be encouraged? It's like, I'm mad, I want to be mad, just let me be mad. You don't say that, but it's how it's like, yeah, I know I shouldn't be, but I want to, so. That's all fear. It's fear. Here they are, and they're telling them, and they're giving them this pep talk, and they're explaining to them why they shouldn't be afraid, and how God was going to help them, and how God was on their side, and they're telling them all this, and the whole time the people had already stopped up their ears, and they weren't even listening. They were just thinking, how do we get rid of these guys? How do we get rid of these guys? Let's stone them. Nice. Nice people. Fear makes you a really nice person, too, as you can see. People don't want to be around a scaredy cat. You know? And the rest of that verse says, and the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of the congregation before all the children of Israel. My first thought at that, okay, they say they're going to stone him with stones, all of a sudden God shows up, which God had been there the whole time, okay, but he made himself known. He made his presence so all of them could see him, okay. My first thought, I wondered where Miriam was during all of this. Do you remember a couple of chapters back, Miriam and Aaron decided they wanted to be as important as Moses, and they started griping against Moses? Do you remember what happened to Miriam? God struck her with leprosy. For 7 days, she had to stay outside the camp with a horrible, horrible, horrible case of leprosy. And God said, you don't speak against my anointed. That's what he said. Now you got Joshua and Caleb are standing up for God and saying, don't rebel against God, you do this. And these congregations say, well, we're just going to stone you. We don't like what you have to say. And God shows up and says, I'm right here and I'm watching this. Don't you know Miriam was like, oh, y'all going to be in trouble. Because I bet she wasn't complaining. I bet you she had learned her lesson. And she's standing back going, ooh, God said, don't mess with his anointed. Don't mess with his children. Well, y'all, we are God's anointed. We are God's children. I think too many times we read these stories in the Bible and we think they're just that, stories. We forget this actually happened. This is not a fairy tale. And we forget, too, that this God is our God. And so, well, he doesn't do miracles anymore. Sure he does. They may not be as big and bold as the Red Sea parting, but he works miracles every day. And he still stands up for his anointed, and that's us. He still stands up for his children. That's us. And he has still made promises that he will still keep to us. I've heard it said that in the Bible, and I haven't counted them, I guess maybe I need to, but it says 365 times it says, fear not. I haven't counted them, so I can't tell you if that's true. But that's one for every day of the year. I don't know of any other phrase in the Bible that's repeated that many times. And I don't even know if that's just the fear nots or if that's every case of fear not, do not fear, be not afraid, do not be afraid. You know, does that include all of those? It's twice in that one verse. Do you think it's important that we not be afraid? Do you think God's trying to get through to us if he tells us, maybe 365 times, maybe more, in this one book, don't be afraid, I've got this. Do not fear, I'm in control. You know, the psalmist said, what can man do unto me? God, if God's on my side, what can man do? That's what Joshua and Caleb were saying. If God's on our side, what can these giants do to us? Nothing unless God lets them. And if God lets them, then it's because he has a purpose. And it's for our good and our glory. Why should we be afraid of bears or snakes or people or situations or circumstances or trials or sickness or whatever? Our human nature is to be afraid. And that's why God keeps repeating over and over, don't. And that's why these particular accounts, and I try to call them accounts rather than stories because, again, stories makes it sound like make-believe, and it's not. These particular accounts are in here to remind us, don't be afraid, God has a plan. Because what we're going to see when we get further along in this chapter, and we know the story already, their lack of faith and their fear caused them to lose everything. They lose it all. How horrible. Everything that they worked for, everything that they had come this far for, everything that God said, I want to give this to you, and they said, no, we don't want it. And God said, fine. How many times, and I thought about that this morning, I thought, when we were talking about complaining about, well, my life isn't the way I want it to be. Sometimes we need to stop and ask, why is that? Is it because God didn't lead us to the right place, or because we didn't go in and take it? Do we not have the life we want or the situation we want or whatever because, God put that in our path? Or do we not have it because we were too afraid to take it when God said, here, I give it to you? That hit me hard this morning because I thought, before I go complaining about something, I need to make sure it's not my fault that I am where I am, or that I have what I have, or don't have what I don't have. Because God said, take this step of faith, and I said, no, I'm too afraid. So, if I can leave you with anything this week, it's a reminder that fear doesn't stop at fear. That's only the beginning. It leads to the complaints. It leads to the blame game. It leads to giving up. It leads to turning our back on God. And leads to the point where we don't even think straight anymore. We can't even think straight. And the Bible talks about that, and the latter times where people become so wicked they don't even think straight. We're there. And that's what fear can do to us, even the saved. Fear can do that to us. So as you go through the week this week, and this is what I have to do, I have to tell myself over and over again during the day. I have to either quote myself a verse or just remind myself, my times are in God's hands. God's got this. Because otherwise, those fears come in and they start gnawing at my brain. What if this happens? And what if that happens? And what if this? And what if that? And what if it? And I got to shut it up. Say, no. I'm not going to let myself do that. Because I don't want to start down this road. This is a long, yucky road, and I don't want to start down it. So I encourage you to do the same. When those thoughts start creeping into your brain, stop them right then. Quote yourself a verse, open up your Bible and read this story or another story like it, and just remind yourself, God's got this. He is in control of all things. Nothing happens and he goes, oh, I missed that one. He's got it all taken care of. And we can trust that. And we'll be much happier in the process. Okay, we'll pray and we'll be dismissed. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so much for this day. We thank you for this lesson, Lord, and this reminder to not be afraid, Lord, to trust that you have everything under control, that you have us where you want us, that all things are working together, Lord, for our good and your glory. And that you can be trusted, Lord, because what are we saying when we don't trust you? We're saying that you're not trustworthy, and what an insult that is. So, Lord, help us, please, to have the faith that we need to have and to show that faith to others as we go through our lives. Please bless our services, Lord. I pray that we will lift up your name and just please you in all that we say and do. In Jesus' name, amen.